immigration that happened in the late 60s and early 70s to Norway, but in particular to Oslo, because that's where majority of the population lives. Since I am from Pakistan, I think it was very important for me to delve into this history and to go a little bit more deeper into what types of archives are present in the museum and other spaces here. So as we're gonna go through the slides, Cooking Time is a project that has an exhibition, but then it also has a large public programming. And that is something that Noor will hopefully get more into. So I'm gonna get into the exhibition aspect of the project. The exhibition is sort of divided into two rooms or into two spaces. So the first part of the project, or the first part of the room, I am looking more into the labor and hospitality part of the project, and also looking into, most importantly, not the fact that most of the Pakistanis that came and found labor in the restaurant and hospitality industry, but also that they formed unions like Pakistan Welfare Union and did a lot of self-organizing in terms of standing up for their fair rights and fair accommodation. Because of course, when you're immigrating to a new country, those are the things that you have the most trouble with. So the first image that we're looking at, it's a photograph. It's an archival photograph that's been found on the Norwegian history website. And it's the celebration of the 14th of August, which is the National Day of Pakistan. So it's all these men celebrating. And the photograph has, of course, been colored with red and blue color pencil. And we will go deeper into what is the reason that I chose those colors. And we can also see on the wall, or like, what do you call it? A list. This is also like all over the exhibition space. It's painted in blue and in red. And of course, the colors are very much present in the Norwegian flag, but then also that was the color of Sporveien uniform when the Pakistani men, or at that time when men were working in Sporveien in the 70s. The second, or like this is a diptych, so the second work that we're looking on the right hand side is a constellation of a lot of archival photographs, posters, text, all that has been taken from a collection of a Norwegian sociologist called Aud Kurbol, whom I have been in contact with for the past 3 years. She's 83 years old. She speaks tiny bit Urdu, which is my mother tongue, and she's the first, she was the first Norwegian woman to have worked very closely with the Pakistani immigrants in the early 70s. And she wrote a book called Den kritisk faz, Innvandring fra Pakistan til Norge, which is also a book that I have delved much deeper into and created a performance work, which we will sort of look into the other slides. But the collaged constellation of that work is very much looking into women representation, that there were women working not only in household or in kitchen, but they were also working at the first samosa factory that was founded in Oslo in the 70s. And then we're, of course, seeing many more things and many more unions and works that the Pakistani community did that was very important. Writing a fremmedarbeideren paper, that was like foreign workers paper, and that was written in 7 languages in the 70s. I mean, I think that's quite bizarre, like 7 languages. We're gonna go forward, and so we see like some details of the archival image that I worked on. Yeah, so some of the posters are of course written in Urdu and then some of them in Norwegian and English. And this wall has images from like this work that I've created is from a video on NRK that is documenting and interviewing the first Pakistani immigrants, and I decided to freeze some of the shots and work with them, because for me it was very important to also talk about that food was not only the medium which of course gave labor or made employment possible for that community, but it also was a place where a lot of them came together in the dormitory. Like food was the place for them to also come together, and that they were never alone in that space. That's another collage work, and as you can see that it's a lot of collage because I really enjoy working with collage, and it's sort of like intervening into the archives and breaking them and correcting them or problematizing them to sort of question how they are represented and how they should be spoken or talked about. Did I? Okay. Yeah, that's another work on the table, and this was the room, this was the space where we mostly did a lot of, this was the room where on the opening day I had my performance. This was also the room where we have met with Pakistani women coming into the space. So it's been a space for reflection and talking with the community. So that photo, you can see it's a red and blue uniform, and that's the Spurwein uniform, and that uniform dictated sort of the space that we made it all red and blue. On the right hand side, we're looking at a photograph of a picnic. So as we saw, the first room was focusing more around the labor and the self-organizing part of the Pakistani community. So in the second room, we dealt more into the leisure and the pleasure of how they spend their times apart from working all the time. Yeah, so that's Faiz Ahmed, and he was present on the opening day of the exhibition. Super happy to see his photograph on the wall. And I have done a little bit of an intervention where I've sort of put these flat bread baskets on top of his leg. As you can see, like those little 1, 2, 3, that's not in the photograph. And the reason we've done it because he's wearing a uniform, but he's living in a, he's being photographed in his stupa, in his home. So it was sort of important for us to like bring this image into the exhibition space to sort of break the labor and the pleasure sort of, or find that middle ground in the project. Yep, that's another photograph. And then we come to one of the big installation works, which is also something that I've played with, that it's a photograph that's taken in Världens ände. I wanted to actually, I was wondering, like, I should ask the audience, like, do you know which fjord that is? But yes, that's the Världens ände, and you can see that the women are making kebabs on a picnic teppa, and it just became a very interesting way to sort of intervene into the space, but then also to make this an interactive installation, to put these carpets, that one of them I bought back from Pakistan, and then the other one we found in a store, at a Somali store in Toyen. And it's so beautiful that this carpets have literally became the space where most of the interactions ended up taking place. So the conversation around the photograph, around the exhibition, sort of happened on this installation, which I think is a way also to extend the project into a more participatory nature, that it wasn't a very static space, but then it also engaged. Yeah, I think I'm running out of time. That's Out Kurbo. And she came on one of, there was a panel discussion that we had, and she was there seeing the image and looking at the work. That's the Praxis curatorial group that came and also conversed about the project. So there has been a massive public programming and interest in the exhibition. That's a zoomed in shot. Cakes were 50 images of cakes were found in the archives. One thing that I forgot to mention, which was very important, was most of the archives have been taken out and used from the archive collection called Norsk I dag, I går, I morgen at the Vestfoldmuseenes, and Aud Kurbo's collection at the Oslo City collection in Grünerløkka. And this is the book that Aud did not write, but I intervened in. But these pages are from the book, and this book became a way for me to intervene into it and make my performance work out of this. And that was a performance that happened on the opening day. If people are interested in listening to the performance, you're more than welcome to ask me later, and I can provide you with the link. I think it's available on Vimeo. Yeah. And now I will give the floor to Noor. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Noor Bahngu. Can everybody hear me okay? I'll look to you in the front to tell me if the mic is too far away. So I'm the curator for this exhibition of Sarah Kazmi's Cooking Time, the second project in her larger series, Abandoned Mansions of Pakistan. And so, like Sarah, I'm also a recent migrant to Norway. I moved here from Canada 3 years ago, and I moved to Canada from India 20 years ago. So there's a long history of movement. And I was personally really invested in the project to really understand the stories that my father-in-law and mother-in-law in Norway told me about. So there was like a personal investment in the history. And more than that, really, I was interested in building a critical genealogy between different generations of people that had come, and ask who had come before me and how had they made possible the conditions of my own arrival. So that was a big research, personal question in the back of my mind. And so I joined Sarah maybe 2 years ago now. It's a long-running project. As the curator for the second leg of the project. And so she invited me to curate the project in Norway at an early stage when she had just started to identify key archives and directions for her research. So in many ways, the final exhibition and the public program has been produced through collaboration over the course of 2 years and shaped by our unique practices in art making and curatorial practices. So I see one of the main contributions, my own contributions to the project, as an interest in and knowledge of archives and counter-archival practices through a decolonial, feminist, and future-oriented lens. And so for my part in our presentation, I'll focus on and unpack some of the key concepts related to Sarah's exhibition and bring in some details from the public program. As you know, public program as we imagined as a way to connect with the community and co-produce knowledge of this history as well. So in the last few years, the archive has moved in and out of my curatorial practice largely as a metaphor, half concept and half material, through which I've been able to wrestle with questions about the ways in which history is written, disseminated, and then canonized. And in my very first exhibition that I curated in 2018, the group exhibition, Not the Camera, but the Filing Cabinet, Performative Body Archives of Contemporary Art, I employed the metaphor of archives to consider the relationship between bodies, performance, and historical memory. And in this project, no archives were consulted at all, and no archivists were harmed. Instead, what was considered was the archive as a form that could easily be embodied by artists as storytellers and knowledge keepers. So like many other curators of contemporary art, I followed in this exhibition and many since, archive as subject, where its materiality was not limited to a repository of documents, but to an openness that could constantly be reshaped. Such an openness, according to French philosopher Jacques Derrida in his book Archive Fever, means we don't operate within a closed, sealed heritage. Archives are not just a memory, they are a reminder. The term is fluid because it needs to adapt to changes in the way humanity consigns its thoughts. And so at this time in my practice, the archive was quite open and existed not outside of, but beyond its materiality. And so with cooking time, I was really able to initiate a different archival turn in my practice, because through working with Sarah and the archives she found, I was also able to appreciate archive as source, as a physical repository that had collected and preserved historical material. And so with the more fluid and open sense of the archive in the back of my mind, I worked with Sarah to study very material archives that she mentioned. So over the course of the research period, we engaged with archives at the Norsk Folk Museum, the Bee Museum, and other online sources as well. And so this process meant filling in application forms to access materials and meeting with archivists. They were a real person now. They were just, some imaginary thing that I dreamed about. It also meant wading through archival material and contacting informants as well as contributors to the archive. And so, very real material sort of struggle we had during the research phase was with access to the Norsk Igor i dag I morgen archive. It took 6 months. Yes. I will never forget that. It took 6 months, and I also had to get my PhD supervisor to sign off on it, even though my dissertation deals with something completely different. So, of course, Sarah and I's work with archives did not in any way take a straightforward approach to archive as source. We had to really use tools to access the archives, but we still felt our aim and responsibility was not merely to visualize, visibilize, and make accessible what the archive held, but also find ways to respond to it in meaningful ways. And so to conceptualize this, I brought in the practice of counter-archiving, which I don't know if many people are familiar with in this room, but it's a lot more emergent in Canada, my home nation, as a way of decolonizing inherited archives. And so according to Dr. Anat Ben-David, counter-archiving engages in alternative modes of knowledge production that reopen the discussion of what is public knowledge. She explains the idea is to tease out what we actually don't know, to invoke public debate about what it is that we would like to know. A counter-archival practice is a provocation to existing archives and a form of resistance that demands an opening and an expansion of the archive to alternative readings and readers. In the counter-archive, the boundaries between archive as subject and archive as source are blurred, and what is instead prioritized is the desire, the intentions of the researcher. And so I've tried to create these boundaries between what I mean what we mean by archive/counter-archiving. I maybe should have used like a dotted line to talk about the porosity between these ideas. But in any case, the counter-archival approach also, I want to divide quickly into 3 prongs, which were decolonial, feminist, and future-oriented. And so through a decolonial approach, we were really interested in thinking critically about the inherent coloniality of the archives, the ways in which they are formed to gain knowledge of and also to govern minoritized subjects. And so we looked at the biographies of the archivists and the objects collected in the archive. And our initial assumption was that the producers and the subjects/objects of knowledge could be clearly differentiated along racial lines. And this was, of course, complicated when we learned about the different horizontal methodologies adopted by the Norwegian archivists and the amount of community-based training they did prior to initiating the archival collection. Further, we also contacted individuals who had donated their stories/photographic materials to the archive, and particularly Fez Ahmed Fez, but who also was a key member of the archival team, creating connections between the community and the research team. And so in light of these discoveries, to decolonize the archive meant revealing the multiplicity of the archive, of the diverse investments in its construction. And we did this through both exhibition design and public programming. And in the exhibition itself, Sarah produced a collage work using Fez Ahmed Fez's image and placed it in one of the entryways, which referenced his position as both insider and outsider, existing on the threshold of the archive. And in terms of public programming, we developed a panel discussion featuring Arnfinn Midtboen, Shazia Majid, and Thomas Valle. And unsurprisingly, the audience that was included also brought in many of the archivists who had originally been part of the Norske Gård I Dag I Morgen archive. So they were there to quickly correct us on anything that we missed or forgot about. The event also brought museum workers engaged in minority histories and graduate students. And over the course of 2 hours, we discussed different positions taken on by researchers in the field, different personal and political investments of what motivated one archivist to pursue a specific history, or what political events happened in their lifetime, their teenage years, to make them interested in Pakistani history. And also we talked about the ways in which the field had changed in the last few decades. And so it was really useful to have Arnfinn Midtboen as one of the panelists who had written the introduction for Aud Korbol's book, just to talk about how research methods, methodologies, and so on had changed in 30 years. And alongside the panel discussion, we also had the horizontal workshop/picnic, which was organized over the summer, and you can see the carpets, also reference the carpets that Sarah used in one of her installations. So it's a way to bring the exhibition outside into the backyard of the Interkulturelt Museum, and to also dissolve the kind of hierarchies between curator, artist, members